The radio crackled to life at 2:47 p.m., cutting through the humid Atlanta afternoon like a blade. Unit K97. We've got a disturbance at the old Fort McPherson site. Possible trespasser with military equipment. Sarah Collins grabbed the radio from her patrol car's dashboard, her green eyes already scanning the horizon. Copy that, dispatch, en route. She glanced at Max, her Belgian Malinois partner, who was already sitting at attention in the passenger seat. His dark ears were pricked forward, and those intelligent brown eyes held the same alertness that had saved their lives countless times over the past 6 years. "What do you think, boy? Another urban explorer playing soldier?" Sarah asked as she fired up the engine. Max's tail gave a single thump against the seat, their usual signal that he was ready for whatever waited ahead. The abandoned military base sprawled across 30 acres of cracked concrete and rusted buildings on Atlanta's south side. Sarah had been here before, chasing drug dealers and copper thieves who thought the empty structures made perfect hideouts. She was wrong every time. As they approached the main gate, Sarah spotted fresh tire tracks in the dust. Heavy treads, definitely not from a civilian vehicle. "Looks like our trespasser brought friends," she murmured, cutting the engine near the fence line. Max was out of the car before Sarah had even opened her door, his black tactical harness gleaming in the afternoon sun. The camera mounted on his vest was already recording, and his nose was working overtime, sorting through the cocktail of scents that clung to the abandoned base. They moved through the gate in practiced silence, Sarah's hand resting on her service weapon while Max quartered back and forth, reading the story written in footprints and disturbed gravel. The afternoon heat made waves rise from the cracked asphalt, but Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. Something was off. The sound hit them first, the low rumble of a diesel engine turning over. Sarah's blood went cold. That wasn't the sound of a car or truck. She'd grown up around military vehicles, thanks to her father's career, and she knew that particular growl. "Tank," she whispered, and Max's head snapped toward her, his body going rigid. They rounded the corner of Building C and found themselves staring at an M1A2 Abrams main battle tank, sitting in the middle of what used to be the motor pool. The 70-ton monster looked like a steel dinosaur awakening from a long sleep. Its main gun pointed toward the base's administrative buildings. A man in desert camouflage was climbing into the commander's hatch, moving with the practiced ease of someone who'd done this 1,000 times before. He was young, maybe late 20s, with the kind of buzz cut and straight posture that screamed active military. "Atlanta PD!" Sarah called out, her voice carrying across the empty space. "Step away from the vehicle!" The soldier's head snapped up, and for a moment Sarah saw something flicker across his face. Not surprise, calculation. Like he'd been expecting this moment and was running through his options. "Just conducting routine maintenance, officer," he called back, his voice carrying a slight southern drawl. "Nothing to worry about here." Sarah approached slowly, Max at her heel. The dog's usual confidence was missing, replaced by something Sarah had rarely seen in her partner. Uncertainty. Max was reading the air, his nostrils flaring as he processed scents she couldn't even imagine. "This base has been decommissioned for 2 years, Sarah said, stopping about 20 feet from the tank. "What unit are you with?" "3rd Armored Division," the soldier replied smoothly. "We're prepping this beauty for transport to Fort Benning, just running diagnostics." It sounded reasonable. It felt wrong. Max took a step forward, then stopped. His ears went flat against his head, and a low growl rumbled in his chest. Sarah had seen her partner face down armed criminals, aggressive suspects, and even wild animals. She'd never seen him look afraid. "Something's not right here," she said, her hand moving instinctively to her radio. The soldier's expression hardened. "Look, lady, I've got authorization. You want to see my orders?" But Sarah wasn't looking at him anymore. She was watching Max, and what she saw made her heart race. Her partner, her brave, unflappable partner, was backing away from the tank. Max had never backed down from anything in his life. The diesel engine coughed and rumbled, and the soldier reached for something inside the commander's hatch. Sarah's training kicked in, and she was moving before her conscious mind had processed the threat, her hand going to her weapon. "Step away from the tank, now!" Max exploded into motion, not toward the soldier as Sarah expected, but directly at the tank itself. His powerful hindquarters launched him onto the vehicle's front slope, and he planted himself squarely between the soldier and the controls, his teeth bared in a snarl that could have come from a wolf. "What the hell?" the soldier started, but Max wasn't moving. 90 pounds of highly trained police dog blocked his access to the tank's interior, and those brown eyes held a determination that brooked no argument. Sarah felt the pieces clicking into place, none of them forming a picture she liked. Max didn't act this way without reason. In 6 years of partnership, he'd never once disobeyed a direct command or shown fear in the line of duty. If Max was saying no, there was a damn good reason. "Sir, I need you to exit the vehicle immediately," Sarah said, her weapon now drawn but pointed at the ground. "This area is under investigation." The soldier's mask slipped for just a moment, and Sarah saw something cold and dangerous underneath. "You're making a mistake, Officer Collins." The fact that he knew her name when she hadn't given it made her blood turn to ice. Max's growl deepened, vibrating through the metal hull of the tank like a warning bell. Sarah had heard that sound maybe 3 times in 6 years, and each time it had preceded violence. Her partner wasn't just being protective, he was genuinely afraid of something inside that 70-ton machine. "How do you know my name?" Sarah demanded, keeping her weapon ready but not raising it. The soldier was still partially inside the commander's hatch, his hands visible, but his body positioned to retreat into the tank at any moment. "Your nameplate," he said, nodding toward her uniform. But Sarah's nameplate was turned at an angle, barely visible from his position 20 feet away and 8 feet up. "Try again," she said coldly. The man's jaw tightened. "Look, officer, I don't know what your dog's problem is, but I've got a job to do here. This tank needs to be operational by 1800 hours. Max shifted his position, placing his body more directly over the main hatch. His hackles were raised, making him look twice his normal size, and his eyes never left the soldier's hands. Sarah had trained with Max since he was 18 months old, worked crime scenes that would give nightmares to hardened detectives, and watched him take down armed suspects without hesitation. She'd never seen him like this. "Max, here," she commanded, testing whether her partner was responding to training or instinct. Max didn't budge. Not even a glance in her direction. Sarah's blood went cold. In 6 years, Max had never ignored a direct command. Ever. Her father's voice echoed in her memory from childhood visits to military bases. "When the dogs won't go in, you don't go in either." "Sir, I need you to exit that vehicle immediately. This is not a request." The soldier's face hardened. "You don't have jurisdiction here, lady. This is federal property, federal equipment, and federal business." "Decommissioned federal property," Sarah corrected, pulling out her radio. "Dispatch, this is Unit K97. I need backup at the Fort McPherson site, Building C motor pool. Possible theft of military equipment." "Negative on that backup request," came the crackling reply. "All units are tied up with the downtown incident. ETA on assistance is 45 minutes minimum." 45 minutes. Sarah glanced at the soldier, who had definitely heard the transmission and was looking far too pleased about it. "You called this in?" she realized. "The downtown incident. You're the reason all units are busy." His smile was cold and calculating. "Smart girl. Too smart for your own good." Max's ears swiveled toward Sarah for just a moment, acknowledging her presence, before snapping back to the soldier. The dog's nose was working overtime, and Sarah could see his nostrils flaring as he processed whatever cocktail of scents was coming from inside the tank. "What's in there?" Sarah asked, her voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her system. "What is Max smelling that's got him spooked? Nothing that concerns you?" The soldier started to lower himself into the hatch, but Max launched forward, placing his front paws on the man's shoulders and pushing him back up. The move was so sudden and aggressive that the soldier nearly lost his balance. Jesus Christ, get this mutt off me. Max isn't a mutt, Sarah said, moving closer but keeping her distance from the tank itself. He's a trained police dog, and right now he's telling me that whatever's in that tank shouldn't be there. She pulled out her phone and started taking pictures. The tank, the soldier, the serial numbers visible on the hull. The soldier's expression shifted from annoyance to genuine concern. "You need to stop that right now," he said, his voice taking on a harder edge. "Freedom of the press," Sarah replied, continuing to document everything she could see. "Public property, public record." The soldier reached for something at his belt, and Sarah's weapon was up and aimed before he could complete the motion. "Hands where I can see them." "Easy, easy," he said, raising his hands. "Just my radio. Need to report a situation." "The situation is that you're trespassing on government property with stolen military equipment," Sarah said. "Max, speak." On command, Max let out a sharp bark that echoed off the surrounding buildings. It was their signal for suspicious activity, and the soldier's reaction told Sarah everything she needed to know. He flinched like Max had fired a gun. "You're not military," Sarah said, the pieces falling into place. "Military personnel don't flinch at working dogs. You might have the uniform, might know the lingo, but you've never actually served." The soldier's facade cracked completely. "You don't know what you're dealing with here, lady. Walk away. Take your dog and walk away, and everybody stays healthy." "Can't do that," Sarah said. "See, Max is telling me there's something in that tank that doesn't belong there, and in 6 years of partnership, he's never been wrong." Max shifted his weight, settling more firmly across the hatch opening. His message was clear. Nobody was getting into that tank while he was alive to prevent it. The soldier's hand moved toward his radio again, and this time Sarah didn't stop him. She wanted to know who he was talking to, wanted to understand the scope of what she'd stumbled into. "Base, this is Reaper," he said into the device. "We've got a problem." The response was immediate and clear enough for Sarah to hear. "Handle it. Package needs to move on schedule." Package, not equipment, not cargo. Package. Sarah felt the familiar chill that came with stumbling into something much bigger than it first appeared. She'd felt it before, during cases that started simple and ended with federal task forces and classified briefings. "Max," she said quietly, "what have we gotten ourselves into this time?" Her partner's tail gave a single nervous thump against the tank's hull. Even he didn't know the answer to that question. The standoff stretched for 20 minutes before backup finally arrived. Sarah heard the rumble of approaching vehicles and felt a mixture of relief and apprehension. The fake soldier, she was certain now that's what he was, had spent the entire time staring at his watch and muttering into his radio. Max hadn't moved from his position blocking the tank's hatch, and Sarah could see the strain in her partner's muscles from maintaining his vigilant stance. Detective Ray Martinez was the first through the gate, his unmarked sedan kicking up dust as he pulled into the motor pool. Sarah had worked with Martinez on 3 major cases, and she trusted his instincts almost as much as she trusted Max's. "What have we got, Collins?" Martinez called out as he approached, his hand instinctively moving to his weapon when he saw the tank. "Suspected theft of military equipment," Sarah replied. "Subject claims to be 3rd Armored Division, but his story doesn't check out. Max won't let him near the controls." Martinez looked at the Belgian Malinois still planted firmly across the tank's hatch. "In 6 years, I've never seen that dog back down from anything. What's got him spooked?" "That's what I'm trying to figure out," Sarah said. "Can you run the serial numbers? I've got photos." While Martinez worked his phone, Sarah approached the tank more closely. The vehicle looked legitimate. Proper military paint scheme, correct markings, even the appropriate wear patterns you'd expect from a machine that had seen combat deployment. But something was wrong with the details. "Hey!" she called to the fake soldier, who was now standing beside the tank under the watchful eye of 2 patrol officers. "What's the manufacturing date on this unit?" "How the hell should I know?" he snapped. "I'm transport, not inventory." Sarah ran her fingers along the hull until she found the data plate. August 2019, she read aloud. Interesting, since the 3rd Armored Division was deactivated in 1992. The man's face went pale. Martinez looked up from his phone. Collins, we've got a bigger problem. This tank's serial number shows it was reported stolen from Fort Stewart 3 weeks ago. It was supposed to be in transit to a decommissioning facility in Alabama. Sarah felt the familiar tingle that came with breaking open a major case. So our friend here is definitely not military transport. Max whined softly, the first sound he'd made since his initial growl. Sarah looked at her partner and saw something that made her stomach drop. The dog was trembling. Max didn't tremble. Max had faced down armed gang members, aggressive pit bulls, and suspects high on PCP without showing fear. But right now, 90 pounds of highly trained police dog was shaking like a leaf. Martinez, I need to get inside that tank, Sarah said quietly. No way, the detective replied. We don't know what's in there. Could be booby-trapped, could be something that's scaring the hell out of the best detection dog in the APD, Sarah interrupted. Max is trained to detect explosives, drugs, and accelerants. His reaction suggests one of those 3, and none of them should be in a tank. She approached Max slowly, speaking in the calm, measured tone she used during high-stress situations. What is it, boy? What do you smell? Max's nose twitched, and he looked directly at Sarah for the first time since this started. His eyes held an intelligence that sometimes unnerved her, the look of a creature trying to communicate something urgent across the species barrier. He's not just detecting something, Sarah realized. He's trying to warn us about something specific. Martinez had been watching the exchange with growing concern. Collins, in 10 years of working with K9 units, I've learned one thing. When the dog says no, you listen. Sarah nodded and turned to the fake soldier. You've got one chance to tell us what's really going on here. What's in that tank that's got my partner terrified? I want a lawyer, the man said. You'll get one, Martinez replied, after we figure out whether we're dealing with stolen military equipment or something that requires the bomb squad. The mention of explosives made the fake soldier's eyes widen slightly. Look, I don't know anything about bombs. I was just supposed to move the tank from point A to point B, that's it. Who hired you? Sarah asked. I can't or won't, Martinez interrupted, because if there's something dangerous in that tank and people get hurt because you stayed quiet, you're looking at federal charges. Sarah watched the internal struggle play out on the man's face. Whatever he was involved in, it was big enough to scare him into silence, but the mention of potential casualties had clearly shaken him. There might be modifications, he said finally. What kind of modifications? Sarah demanded. Before he could answer, Max suddenly backed away from the tank entirely, his tail tucked between his legs. The dog retreated to Sarah's side and pressed against her leg, a behavior she'd only seen twice before, both times when they'd encountered volatile chemical spills. Chemical detection, Sarah breathed. Martinez, we need hazmat protocols. Now. The detective was already on his radio, calling for specialized units. Sarah knelt beside Max, running her hands through his fur to calm both of them. Good boy, she whispered. Good boy for warning us. Max looked up at her, and for a moment Sarah could swear she saw relief in those brown eyes. He'd done his job. He'd kept her safe from whatever was hidden inside that steel monster. As the hazmat team's sirens grew louder in the distance, Sarah looked at the tank with new understanding. This wasn't just theft. This was something much more dangerous, something that required chemical weapons protocols and federal intervention. What have you gotten us into? She asked the fake soldier. His answer chilled her to the bone. Something way above your pay grade, lady. Something that's going to get us all killed if the wrong people find out you're here. Max pressed closer against her leg, and Sarah realized they'd stumbled into something that would test every skill they'd developed over 6 years of partnership. The hazmat team's preliminary readings sent shockwaves through the assembled law enforcement personnel. Sarah watched from behind the safety perimeter as technicians in full protective gear approached the tank, their instruments crackling with ominous clicks and beeps. Max sat beside her, calmer now that they were upwind and at a safe distance, but his ears remained alert. Trace amounts of organophosphate compounds, the hazmat team leader reported over his radio, consistent with chemical weapon residue, but not at immediately dangerous levels. Sarah felt her blood turn cold. Chemical weapons, in the middle of Atlanta. Detective Martinez pulled her aside, his expression grim. "Collins, this just became a federal case. FBI's sending a team, and so is the Army's Criminal Investigation Command. We're about to be up to our necks in alphabet soup." Before Sarah could respond, Agent Lisa Chen from the FBI's Atlanta field office arrived with a convoy of black SUVs. Sarah had worked with Chen before on a human trafficking case, and she respected the agent's no-nonsense approach to complex investigations. "Detective Martinez, Officer Collins," Chen said as she approached. "I need to know everything about how you discovered this situation." Sarah gave a complete briefing, emphasizing Max's unusual behavior and the fake soldier's knowledge of her name. Chen listened intently, occasionally glancing at Max, who was now being examined by a veterinary specialist to ensure he hadn't been exposed to anything dangerous. "The subject you arrested is Jake Morrison," Chen said, consulting her tablet. "Former Army Special Forces, served 2 tours in Afghanistan before deserting 2 years ago. He's been on our watch list for suspected involvement in arms trafficking." "Arms trafficking," Sarah repeated. "Is that what this is about?" "Partly," Chen replied. "Morrison was recruited by someone with serious resources and military knowledge. The modifications to this tank aren't amateur work. They required engineering expertise and access to restricted materials." Martinez looked at the tank, now surrounded by hazmat barriers. "What kind of modifications are we talking about?" Agent Chen hesitated before answering. "The tank's ammunition storage has been converted into a chemical weapons delivery system. Whoever did this turned a defensive military vehicle into a potential weapon of mass destruction." Sarah felt sick. How much damage could it have done? "If deployed in a populated area, conservative estimate is several thousand casualties," Chen said quietly. "Your dog may have just prevented a terrorist attack." The weight of that statement settled over them like a heavy blanket. Sarah looked at Max, who was getting a clean bill of health from the veterinarian. Her partner had quite literally saved lives by trusting his instincts. "I want to interrogate Morrison," Sarah said. "Max detected something that our equipment couldn't. There might be details we're missing." Chen nodded. "He's being transferred to federal holding. You can observe, but I'll handle the questioning." An hour later, Sarah found herself in a sterile interrogation room at the federal building downtown. Morrison sat across from Agent Chen, his earlier bravado replaced by nervous exhaustion. Sarah and Max observed from behind one-way glass. "Jake, you're looking at federal charges that could put you away for life," Chen began. "Terrorism, weapons trafficking, conspiracy, the works. But I'm willing to discuss a deal if you cooperate." Morrison shifted in his chair. "I was just transport. I didn't know about the chemical modifications until after I took the job." "Who hired you?" Chen asked. "I never met him face to face. Everything was handled through intermediaries. Military guy, though. I could tell by how he talked, how he planned operations." Sarah leaned forward, watching Morrison's body language. Something about his story felt incomplete. "How did you know Officer Collins's name?" Chen continued. Morrison's face paled. "He told me. Said if I ran into local law enforcement, I should specifically watch out for the K9 unit. Said the dog might detect things that human officers would miss." Sarah's blood went cold. Whoever was behind this knew about Max's capabilities specifically. "This military contact," Chen pressed, "did he give you any names, any details about his background?" "Called himself Colonel," Morrison said. "Never got a real name. But he knew things, classified things about chemical weapons programs, delivery systems, military protocols. This wasn't some weekend warrior playing dress-up." Max suddenly stood up in the observation room, his attention focused on Morrison through the glass. Sarah had seen this behavior before. Max was reading something in the suspect's demeanor that humans might miss. "He's lying," Sarah said quietly to Martinez, who was observing with her. "About what?" "Something. Max is picking up on deception markers. Morrison knows more than he's saying." As if summoned by her words, Agent Chen's voice came through the intercom. "Jake, I think you're holding back. What aren't you telling me?" Morrison's composure cracked. "Look, I got out of the army because I couldn't handle the politics, okay? But this guy, he offered me more money than I'd ever seen to do one simple transport job. Move the tank from point A to point B, no questions asked." But you did ask questions," Chen said. "Damn right I did. When I saw what they'd done to that tank, when I realized what it could do." Morrison's voice dropped to a whisper. "I tried to back out. That's when he told me about the cop with the dog. Said if I got cold feet, if I tried to run, he'd make sure I never made it out of Atlanta alive." Sarah felt pieces clicking into place. "Chen," she said into her microphone, "ask him about the downtown incident that pulled all the backup away." Chen nodded and posed the question. Morrison's reaction was immediate. His hands started shaking. "That wasn't supposed to happen," he said. "The diversion was just supposed to be a false alarm, keep the cops busy while I moved the tank. But something went wrong. People got hurt." "What kind of diversion?" Chen demanded. "Bomb threat at the CNN center, but I swear it was supposed to be fake. Just a phone call to tie up resources." Morrison's voice broke. "He didn't tell me there would be a real device." Sarah realized with growing horror that they weren't just dealing with arms trafficking. They were dealing with someone willing to hurt innocent people as a distraction, someone with the resources to coordinate multiple operations simultaneously. "Chen," she said into the microphone, "we need to know who this colonel really is, because if he's willing to bomb civilian targets just to move one tank, this is just the beginning." Undim, Max whined softly beside her, and Sarah could see her own fears reflected in her partner's intelligent eyes. They'd stumbled into something much bigger than a theft case, something that threatened the entire city. Sarah sat in her apartment that evening, still processing the day's revelations. Max lay beside her on the couch, his head resting on her lap, sensing her emotional turmoil. The case had taken a turn that hit too close to home, stirring memories she'd spent years trying to bury. Her father's military portrait stared down at her from the mantelpiece. Staff Sergeant Michael Collins, killed in action in Iraq 15 years ago. The official report claimed an IED explosion, but Sarah had always suspected there was more to the story. Too many classified redactions, too many unanswered questions from his commanding officers. "What would you have done, Dad?" she whispered, running her fingers through Max's fur. "Would you have trusted the system, or would you have kept digging?" Max lifted his head, those intelligent brown eyes studying her face. He could read her moods better than most humans, and right now he was offering the silent comfort that had gotten her through countless difficult nights. The phone rang, interrupting her thoughts. Agent Chen's voice was tense. "Collins, I need you to come in. We've got developments on the Morrison case." "What kind of developments?" "The kind that require your specific expertise. How well do you know military chemical weapons protocols?" Sarah's blood chilled. "My father was CBRN, chemical, biological, radiological, nuclear defense. He trained me on basics when I was a kid, said it might save my life someday. It might save a lot of lives today. Can you be here in an hour?" Sarah looked at Max, who was already standing and moving toward his tactical harness. Her partner always knew when duty called. "We'll be there in 30 minutes. The federal building was buzzing with activity when Sarah and Max arrived. Agent Chen met them at the elevator, her expression grave. "Morrison started talking after you left. Turns out the tank wasn't the only piece of military equipment that's gone missing. We're tracking at least 6 major thefts from bases across the southeast over the past 18 months. They walked past rooms full of federal agents and military personnel, all focused on computer screens showing maps, financial records, and personnel files. The pattern suggests someone with intimate knowledge of military logistics," Chen continued. "Someone who knows exactly which equipment to target and how to move it without triggering security protocols." Sarah felt a familiar knot forming in her stomach. Inside job? Has to be. But the scope suggests this goes higher than a few corrupt sergeants selling surplus equipment. We're talking about coordination across multiple installations, involving millions of dollars in military hardware. They entered a briefing room where Colonel James Patterson from Army CID was reviewing files. Sarah recognized his rank insignia and felt a reflexive tension, the same feeling she got whenever she had to deal with military bureaucracy. "Officer Collins," Patterson said, standing to greet her. "I understand your father served in CBRN." "Yes, sir," Sarah replied, her voice carefully neutral. "Then you'll understand the significance of what we're dealing with. The chemical modifications to that tank weren't improvised. They were professionally engineered. Someone with advanced training converted a combat vehicle into a chemical weapons delivery platform." Max shifted beside Sarah, sensing her discomfort. The dog had an uncanny ability to read human emotions, and right now he was picking up on her growing suspicion of military involvement. Patterson continued, "We need someone who understands both chemical weapons protocols and police investigation techniques. Your unique background makes you invaluable to this investigation." Sarah looked at the files spread across the table, photographs of missing equipment, personnel records, shipping manifests. The scope was staggering. "How long has this been going on?" she asked. "We're not sure," Chen admitted. "The thefts were initially classified as separate incidents. It wasn't until Morrison's arrest that we started seeing the pattern." Sarah studied the timeline on the wall chart. The first theft occurred just 2 months after her father's death. The timing sent chills down her spine. "Colonel Patterson," she said carefully, "what kind of security clearance would someone need to orchestrate something like this?" "Top secret minimum, probably special access program level for the chemical weapons components." The knot in Sarah's stomach tightened. Her father had held those clearances. She thought about all the times he'd come home from work, stressed and angry, muttering about corruption and incompetence in the ranks. Max nudged her hand, bringing her back to the present. Her partner was watching her with concern, those brown eyes full of understanding. He'd been with her through the worst nights, when the nightmares about her father's death kept her awake. "There's something else," Agent Chen said quietly. "Morrison mentioned that his contact knew about your father's service record, specifically." Sarah's world tilted. "What did he say?" "That Officer Collins might be problematic because of her family history with military cover-ups." The room went silent. Sarah felt like she'd been punched in the gut. Her father's death, the classified details, the unanswered questions, it was all connected somehow. "Someone's been watching me," she realized. They knew about my background, knew about Max's capabilities, knew exactly how to keep us away from that tank. Colonel Patterson leaned forward. "What exactly do you know about your father's death, Officer Collins?" Sarah looked at Max, drawing strength from her partner's steady presence. "I know the official story doesn't add up. I know there were classified operations he was involved in that never made it into his service record. And I know that every time I tried to get answers, I hit bureaucratic walls. Your father was investigating irregularities in chemical weapons disposal protocols when he died," Patterson said quietly. "He'd filed reports about missing inventory, about unauthorized modifications to disposal procedures." Sarah felt the pieces clicking into place with terrible clarity. "He was killed because he was getting too close to the truth." "We can't prove that," Chen said. "But the timing is suspicious, and now, 15 years later, we're dealing with someone who has access to the same classified information your father was investigating." Max stood and pressed against Sarah's leg, offering comfort. Her partner had an intuitive understanding of human emotion that sometimes unnerved her. Right now, he was anchoring her to the present when the past threatened to overwhelm her. "I want to catch whoever killed my father," Sarah said, her voice steady despite the emotional storm raging inside her. "And I want to stop them before they turn Atlanta into a chemical wasteland." Patterson nodded. "Then we're going to need you and Max to do something dangerous. We need you to help us draw the colonel out of hiding." Sarah looked at her partner, who tilted his head in that questioning way that meant he was ready for whatever came next. They'd faced danger together before, but never anything this personal. "What did you have in mind?" she asked. The plan was simple in theory. Use Sarah and Max as bait to draw out the Colonel's organization. Sarah would continue the investigation visibly, making herself a target, while federal agents provided backup. What nobody expected was how quickly the organization would respond. Sarah was reviewing case files at her desk the next morning when Detective Martinez approached, his expression troubled. "Collins, you need to see this." He handed her a manila envelope that had been left on her patrol car's windshield overnight. No postmark, no return address, just her name written in block letters across the front. Max, lying beside her desk, lifted his head and sniffed the air, his nose wrinkling in distaste. "He doesn't like it," Sarah observed, carefully opening the envelope with latex gloves. Inside was a single photograph. Sarah leaving her apartment building that morning, taken with a telephoto lens from across the street. On the back, someone had written, "Your father asked too many questions. Don't repeat his mistakes." Sarah's blood ran cold. They'd been watching her home. "Martinez, I need you to call Agent Chen immediately," she said, her voice steady, despite the fear crawling up her spine. "And get a forensics team to process my car." As Martinez made the call, Sarah studied the photograph more carefully. The angle suggested it had been taken from the parking garage across from her building. Professional quality, expensive equipment. These weren't amateurs. Max stood and moved to the window, his ears alert and his body tense. Sarah had seen this behavior before. Her partner was scanning for threats, his highly developed senses detecting something she couldn't perceive. "What is it, boy?" she asked quietly. Max's low growl was barely audible, but Sarah heard it clearly. Her partner was telling her they were still being watched. Agent Chen arrived within 20 minutes, bringing a full forensics team and several unmarked vehicles. While technicians processed Sarah's patrol car, Chen examined the photograph with a magnifying glass. "High-quality paper, professional-grade printing," she observed. "This was taken with military-spec surveillance equipment. Whoever sent this has serious resources." Sarah felt exposed, vulnerable in a way she hadn't experienced since her early days on patrol. The idea that someone had been watching her home, possibly for weeks or months, made her skin crawl. "We're moving you to a safe house," Chen announced. "No," Sarah said firmly. "That's exactly what they want, to scare me off the case. Besides, Max and I work better in familiar territory." Chen started to protest, but Sarah cut her off. "Agent Chen, they've been watching me, which means they know my routines, my habits, my security measures. Moving to an unfamiliar location just gives them new advantages." Max pressed against Sarah's leg, offering silent support. Her partner understood the situation better than most humans would. They were hunters being hunted, and changing territory could be more dangerous than staying put. "At least let us set up surveillance around your building," Chen insisted. Sarah nodded. "But keep it subtle. If they know we know they're watching, they might escalate." The rest of the day passed in tense routine. Sarah and Max completed their regular patrols, but she found herself constantly checking mirrors, scanning crowds, second-guessing every shadow. Max was equally alert, his head on a swivel as they moved through the city. It was during their afternoon patrol that the second message arrived. Sarah had stopped at a gas station in downtown Atlanta when she noticed Max's behavior change. The dog's ears flattened against his head, and he began moving in a tight circle, a clear warning sign. "What's wrong?" Sarah asked, following Max's gaze toward her patrol car. Someone had slipped a note under her windshield wiper while she was inside paying for gas. The timing was perfect. Whoever was watching had waited for the exact moment she was out of sight. This note was different. Instead of a photograph, it contained a detailed description of her morning routine, the time she left her apartment, the route she took to work, the coffee shop where she stopped every Tuesday. The message was clear. They knew everything about her life, but it was the final line that made her blood freeze. "We know about Max's morning walks in Piedmont Park. It would be a shame if something happened to such a well-trained animal." Sarah's hands shook as she read the threat against her partner. Max sensed her emotional shift and moved closer, pressing his warm body against her legs. The dog's loyalty was absolute. He would die protecting her, just as she would die protecting him. "They just made a mistake," Sarah said quietly, pulling out her phone to call Agent Chen. "Threatening my partner crosses a line they shouldn't have crossed." Max looked up at her, and Sarah saw determination in those brown eyes. Her partner was ready for whatever came next. When Agent Chen arrived, she took one look at the note, and her expression hardened. "This changes things. They're not just trying to scare you off, they're preparing to take direct action." "No, what kind of direct action?" "The kind that usually involves making problems disappear permanently," Chen said grimly. "Sarah, you and Max are now officially under federal protection, whether you like it or not." As if summoned by the conversation, Sarah's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Check your apartment." Sarah's blood went cold. Someone had been inside her home. The drive to her apartment building felt like the longest 20 minutes of her life. Federal agents had already secured the area by the time she and Max arrived, but the damage was done. Her front door stood open, and Sarah could see federal technicians photographing the interior. Agent Chen met her in the hallway, her expression grim. "They didn't take anything," Chen reported, "but they left a message." Sarah entered her apartment with Max at her side. The living room looked normal, except for one detail that made her heart stop. Her father's military portrait had been turned face down on the mantelpiece. Propped against it was a single sheet of paper with a message that chilled her to the bone. "Last warning, walk away or join your father." Max moved to the mantelpiece and sniffed the area carefully, his nose detecting traces of whoever had been in their home. The violation felt personal, intimate in a way that made Sarah angry rather than afraid. "They just declared war," she said quietly. Agent Chen nodded. "The question is, are you ready to fight back?" Sarah looked at Max, who was watching her with unwavering loyalty in his eyes. Her partner had never backed down from a fight, and neither would she. "We've been ready for 6 years," she replied. "It's time to hunt these bastards down." The federal task force had commandeered an entire floor of the Atlanta FBI field office, transforming it into a war room. Wall-mounted screens displayed maps, personnel files, and shipping records from military bases across the southeast. Sarah studied the data with growing unease, Max lying alert beside her chair. "Here's what we know," Agent Chen began, addressing the assembled team of FBI agents, military investigators, and local law enforcement. 6 major thefts from military installations over 18 months. Total value, $47 million in equipment and weapons. Colonel Patterson pointed to a timeline on the main screen. "The pattern is sophisticated. Each theft targeted specific equipment that, when combined, could create weapons of mass destruction. Someone with intimate knowledge of military inventory and transport protocols planned this." Sarah raised her hand. "What's the connection between the bases? Same command structure? Shared personnel?" "That's where it gets interesting," Chen replied, pulling up a new display. "On the surface, these installations have nothing in common. Different commands, different missions, different geographic regions. But when we dig deeper, the screen showed a web of personnel transfers, temporary assignments, and logistics contracts. At the center of the web was a name that made Sarah's blood run cold: Draven Consulting Group. "Victor Draven," Patterson said, his voice tight with anger. "Former colonel, Army Chemical Corps, decorated veteran, impeccable service record, early retirement 3 years ago to start a private military consulting firm." Sarah studied Draven's photograph on the screen. Mid-50s, silver hair, cold blue eyes that seemed to look right through the camera. Everything about him screamed military precision and barely controlled violence. His consulting group has contracts with all 6 bases that were hit, Chen continued. Legitimate contracts for security assessments and logistics optimization. The perfect cover for gathering intelligence on high-value targets. Max suddenly stood, his attention focused on the screen displaying Draven's photo. The dog's hackles rose slightly, and a low growl rumbled in his chest. Sarah had never seen her partner react to a photograph before. He recognizes something, Sarah said, watching Max's body language carefully. Max, what is it? The dog moved closer to the screen, his nose working as if trying to catch a scent from the image. His behavior was unsettling. Max was responding to Draven as if the man were physically present. Detective Martinez, who had been quietly reviewing files, looked up with a troubled expression. Collins, you need to see this. He handed her a personnel file marked classified. Inside was a photograph that made Sarah's heart stop. Her father, Staff Sergeant Michael Collins, standing beside a younger Victor Draven at a chemical weapons disposal facility in Iraq. Your father and Draven served together, Martinez said quietly. Same unit, same deployment. Your dad was investigating irregularities in chemical weapons disposal protocols when he died. Guess who was in charge of those protocols? Sarah felt the room spinning around her. The mysterious colonel who had threatened her, who knew her family history, who had orchestrated her father's death. It was Victor Draven. He killed my father, she whispered, the words coming out like a physical blow. Agent Chen placed a supportive hand on Sarah's shoulder. We can't prove that yet, but the circumstantial evidence is compelling. Colonel Patterson pulled up another file. After your father's death, Draven received a commendation for maintaining chemical weapons security protocols. He was promoted and transferred to a prestigious Pentagon assignment. Your father's investigation died with him. Max moved to Sarah's side, pressing his warm body against her legs. The dog's presence grounded her, kept her focused when the emotional revelation threatened to overwhelm her rational mind. Draven's been using his consulting business to identify weaknesses in military security, Sarah said, her voice growing stronger as the pieces fell into place. He targets bases with equipment he needs, uses his legitimate access to gather intelligence, then coordinates thefts using former military personnel like Morrison. But why? Chen asked. He's got money, reputation, legitimate business success. Why risk everything for arms trafficking? Sarah studied Draven's service record more carefully. Look at his promotion timeline after Iraq. Steady advancement until 2 years ago, then nothing. No new contracts, no Pentagon assignments, no advancement opportunities. Patterson nodded grimly. The military-industrial complex can be unforgiving. One wrong political move, one commander who doesn't like you, and suddenly you're frozen out despite decades of service. So he decided to monetize his expertise on the black market, Sarah concluded, selling to the highest bidder, using chemical weapons to maximize profit. Max suddenly moved to the window, his ears alert and his body tense. Sarah recognized the warning signs. Her partner had detected something that concerned him. We've got movement, Agent Chen said, checking her surveillance monitors. 3 black SUVs approaching the building. No license plates. Sarah felt her pulse quicken. Draven knows we're onto him. The federal building's security alarms began blaring, and Sarah could hear the distinctive sound of vehicles screeching to a halt outside. Max's behavior had shifted into full combat mode, ears forward, muscles coiled, ready for action. How did he find us? Patterson demanded. Sarah looked at the assembled task force, realizing with growing horror that their security had been compromised. Someone in this room is feeding him information. The lights suddenly went out, plunging the war room into darkness. Emergency lighting kicked in a moment later, casting everything in an eerie red glow. Through the windows, Sarah could see muzzle flashes from the street below. They're attacking a federal building, Chen said incredulously. Draven's desperate enough to assault a government facility. Max pressed against Sarah's leg, guiding her away from the windows. Her partner's combat instincts were taking over, and Sarah trusted his judgment completely. He's not desperate, Sarah realized with growing dread. He's confident, which means he has resources we haven't accounted for. The sound of explosions echoed from the building's lower floors, and Sarah could hear automatic weapons fire getting closer. Draven wasn't just attacking, he was conducting a full-scale military assault in the heart of Atlanta. "We need to evacuate," Patterson said, moving toward the emergency exits. But Max blocked the doorway, his body language screaming danger. Sarah had learned to trust her partner's instincts above all else, and right now he was telling her that retreat meant death. "They're herding us," she said, understanding flooding through her. "This isn't an attack, it's a trap. Draven wants us to run." Agent Chen looked at the tactical displays showing armed personnel surrounding the building. "Then what do you suggest?" Sarah looked at Max, who met her gaze with absolute determination. They'd trained for situations like this, though she'd never imagined facing a rogue military operation in downtown Atlanta. "We fight," she said, "on our terms, in our territory." Max's tail gave a single thump of approval. Her partner was ready for war. The assault on the federal building lasted exactly 17 minutes, long enough to create chaos, short enough to avoid military response. Sarah and Max had taken defensive positions in the secure communications room, while Agent Chen coordinated with SWAT teams through encrypted channels. When the shooting stopped, an eerie silence settled over downtown Atlanta. "They're gone," Chen reported, checking surveillance feeds. "Professional withdrawal, no casualties left behind. Military precision." Sarah studied the tactical displays showing the aftermath. Burned vehicles, shattered windows, but no bodies. Draven's forces had vanished as quickly as they'd appeared, leaving behind only evidence of their capabilities. This was a demonstration, Sarah realized. He's showing us what he can do. Colonel Patterson emerged from behind an overturned desk, his uniform disheveled, but his expression focused. "Collins is right. This wasn't an assassination attempt. It was psychological warfare." Max had remained alert throughout the attack, but now he moved to the window, his nose working to process the scents left behind by Draven's operatives. Sarah watched her partner's body language carefully, noting the tension in his muscles. "He's still here," she said quietly. "Who?" Chen asked. "Draven. Max is detecting something. He's close." Agent Chen's phone buzzed with an incoming call from an unknown number. She looked at Sarah, who nodded, then activated the speaker. "Agent Chen," a cultured voice said through the phone, "I believe we have much to discuss." Sarah's blood chilled. She recognized the voice from her nightmares, the same cold, precise tone that had haunted her dreams since childhood, when she'd imagined conversations with her father's killer. "Victor Draven," she said. "Officer Collins, you've grown into quite the investigator. Your father would be proud." The casual mention of her father sent rage coursing through Sarah's veins. Max sensed her emotional shift and pressed against her leg, grounding her. "You murdered him," Sarah said, her voice steady, despite the fury building inside her. Draven's laugh was cold and humorless. "Your father was investigating irregularities in chemical weapons disposal. Unfortunately, his investigation threatened operations that were vital to national security." "Whose national security?" Agent Chen interjected. "The United States, or your bank account." "The distinction is less clear than you might think, Agent Chen. I spent 30 years serving this country, watching politicians make decisions that endangered soldiers' lives while bureaucrats grew fat on defense contracts. When the system betrayed me, I simply found more appreciative clients." Sarah studied the tactical displays, trying to pinpoint Draven's location. "What clients? Who are you selling chemical weapons to?" "Organizations that understand the true value of military expertise, cartels that control territories larger than most states, private armies that maintain stability where governments have failed." Colonel Patterson leaned forward. "You're talking about destabilizing entire regions, Draven. Those chemicals could kill thousands of innocent people." "Innocent?" Draven's voice carried bitter amusement. "Tell me, Colonel, how many innocent people have died because of Pentagon incompetence? How many soldiers have been sacrificed for political expediency?" Sarah heard something in Draven's voice that chilled her, genuine conviction. He wasn't just a criminal, he was a true believer who thought he was serving a higher purpose. "You became everything you claimed to hate," she said, "a bureaucrat profiting from other people's suffering." The silence that followed was filled with menace. When Draven spoke again, his voice had dropped to a deadly whisper. "Your father said something similar before he died. Sergeant Collins was very passionate about moral principles right up until the end." Sarah's vision went red with rage, but Max's steadying presence kept her focused. Her partner was watching the windows, his ears alert for any sign of movement. "Where are you, Draven?" Agent Chen demanded. "Closer than you think. You see, the beauty of military consulting is that it provides access to so many interesting facilities, including the very building you're sitting in." The implications hit Sarah like a physical blow. "You have someone inside the federal building." "I have someone everywhere that matters, Officer Collins. How do you think I knew about your father's investigation? How do you think I stayed ahead of federal law enforcement for 2 years? Agent Chen was already on her radio, calling for a complete security sweep of the building, but Sarah knew it was too late. If Draven had inside help, he could have planted surveillance equipment, weapons, or worse, throughout the facility. "What do you want?" Sarah asked. "I want you to understand the futility of your situation. I have resources you can't imagine, contacts you can't reach, and capabilities you can't counter. Your father learned that lesson too late." Max suddenly stiffened, his attention focused on the door leading to the hallway. Sarah had seen this behavior before. Her partner was detecting an immediate threat. "He's here," she whispered, "in the building." Agent Chen drew her weapon, but Sarah was already moving, following Max's lead toward the door. Her partner's instincts had never failed her, and she trusted him more than any surveillance equipment. "Officer Collins," Draven's voice continued through the phone, "your dog has exceptional instincts, just like his predecessor." Sarah's blood went cold. "What predecessor?" "Your father had a K9 partner in Iraq, German shepherd named Rex. Excellent detection dog, very loyal. Unfortunately, Rex was in the vehicle when the IED exploded." The revelation hit Sarah like a punch to the gut. Her father had never mentioned having a K9 partner. The official reports had never mentioned a dog. "You killed them both," she breathed. "I eliminated threats to operational security. Your father and his dog were getting too close to classified information that could have compromised ongoing operations." Max moved to the window, his hackles raised. Through the glass, Sarah could see a figure on the building across the street, too far to make out details, but Max's reaction told her everything she needed to know. "I can see you, Officer Collins," Draven said. "You and your remarkably intuitive partner. It would be a shame if Max met the same fate as Rex." Sarah felt something break inside her, a wall of professional restraint that had held back 15 years of grief and rage. This man had murdered her father, killed an innocent dog, and now he was threatening Max. "Agent Chen," she said, her voice deadly calm, "I need tactical gear and a sniper rifle." "Collins, that's not a request," Sarah interrupted, her eyes never leaving the figure across the street. "He killed my father. He's threatening my partner. This ends now." Max looked up at her, and Sarah saw her own determination reflected in those brown eyes. Her partner was ready to hunt. "See you soon, Draven," she said into the phone, then ended the call. The hunt was about to begin. The rooftop of the federal building offered a commanding view of downtown Atlanta, but Sarah felt exposed as she adjusted the scope on the tactical rifle Agent Chen had reluctantly provided. Max lay beside her, his body tense and alert, scanning the surrounding buildings for threats. The afternoon sun cast long shadows between the glass towers, creating a maze of light and darkness, perfect for ambush. "Collins, this is not standard procedure." Chen's voice crackled through Sarah's earpiece. "We should wait for SWAT backup." "Draven won't wait," Sarah replied, tracking movement in the windows across the street. "He's been planning this for months. Every minute we delay gives him more advantages." Through her scope, Sarah could see tactical positions being established on at least 3 buildings. Draven's mercenaries were professional, moving with military precision as they set up overlapping fields of fire. This wasn't just an ambush, it was a coordinated military operation in the heart of Atlanta. Max's ears swiveled toward the stairwell access, and Sarah heard the distinctive click of tactical gear approaching. Agent Chen emerged onto the roof with a four-man tactical team, all wearing body armor and carrying assault rifles. "Changed your mind about protocol?" Sarah asked without taking her eye from the scope. "I changed my mind about letting a decorated police officer face a small army alone," Chen replied. "Besides, Max outranks half my team." Sarah smiled grimly, but her focus remained on the target building. Through the scope, she could see muzzle flashes and movement, but Draven himself remained elusive. The man was too smart to expose himself to sniper fire. "Movement! Southeast corner, 4th floor," one of the tactical officers reported. Sarah swung her scope toward the indicated position and felt her blood freeze. A figure in tactical gear was assembling what looked like a rocket-propelled grenade launcher aimed directly at their building. "RPG!" Sarah shouted, but the warning came too late. The explosion shattered windows 3 floors below, sending glass and debris raining down onto the street. Sarah felt the building sway from the impact, and Max pressed closer to her, offering comfort despite the chaos. "They're trying to collapse the building," Chen said, her voice tight with fear. Sarah's phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. "Come down and play, Officer Collins, or watch Atlanta burn." Attached to the message was a photograph that made Sarah's heart stop. The elementary school 6 blocks away, with children visible in the playground. Red crosshairs had been digitally superimposed over the image. "He's threatening civilians," Sarah said, showing the phone to Agent Chen. "Son of a bitch," Chen muttered. "How many men does he have positioned around the city?" Max suddenly stood and moved to the edge of the roof, his nose working to process scents carried on the wind. Sarah had seen this behavior before. Her partner was tracking something specific. "What is it, boy?" Sarah asked, following Max's gaze. The dog was looking toward the old Fort McPherson site where this had all started. Sarah felt pieces clicking into place with terrible clarity. "The tank," she breathed. "He's going back to the tank." Agent Chen looked confused. The tank was secured. Hazmat teams cleared it. Draven's not interested in the tank itself, Sarah realized. He's interested in what he learned from our response to it, our procedures, our capabilities, our weaknesses. Sarah's phone rang, and Draven's voice filled the tense silence on the rooftop. "Very good, Officer Collins. You're beginning to understand the scope of this operation. What do you want, Draven? I want you to come home, back to where your father's legacy began, where his daughter's will end." Sarah felt Max press against her leg, offering strength. Her partner's loyalty was absolute, and she drew courage from his unwavering presence. "If I come, do you leave the civilians alone?" Draven's laugh was cold. "I'm a man of my word, Officer Collins. Military honor still means something to me, even if it means nothing to the politicians who betrayed us." Agent Chen grabbed Sarah's arm. "It's a trap. He wants you isolated, away from backup." "Everything's been a trap since the moment we found that tank," Sarah replied. "But Max and I are good at turning traps against the people who set them." She looked at her partner, who met her gaze with complete understanding. They'd trained for situations like this, though neither had imagined facing a rogue military operation. "Agent Chen, I need you to coordinate with Atlanta PD, secure the school, evacuate the surrounding area, and be ready to move on the Fort McPherson site in exactly 1 hour. "What are you going to do?" Sarah checked her weapon and adjusted Max's tactical harness. "We're going to end this the way it started, with Max's instincts and my determination to get answers about my father's death." The descent from the federal building felt like entering enemy territory. Every shadow could hide a sniper, every parked car could contain explosives. Max's senses were hyper-alert, his nose constantly working to detect threats that Sarah's human limitations couldn't perceive. They reached Sarah's patrol car without incident, but she could feel eyes watching from the surrounding buildings. Draven was letting them leave, confident in his ability to control the final confrontation. The drive to Fort McPherson took 30 minutes through Atlanta traffic that seemed oblivious to the military operation unfolding around them. Sarah kept checking her mirrors, but no one followed. Draven wanted her to arrive safely. He had plans that required her presence. "You know this could be suicide," Sarah said to Max as they approached the base's main gate. Max's tail thumped once against the car seat, their signal that he was ready for whatever came next. The abandoned military base looked different in the late afternoon light. Shadows stretched longer between the buildings, creating perfect concealment for an ambush. Sarah could see fresh tire tracks leading toward the motor pool where they'd first encountered the tank. Her phone buzzed with another message: "Building C, come alone, or the children die." Sarah looked at Max, who was watching her with complete trust. Her partner believed in her ability to protect him, just as she believed in his ability to protect her. "Okay, boy," she said, checking her weapon one final time. "Let's go finish what we started." Max's response was a low growl that seemed to say, "Let's hunt." As they approached Building C, Sarah could smell something that made her stomach churn, the distinctive odor of chemical agents that Max had detected days earlier. Draven wasn't just planning to kill her, he was planning to use the location to deploy chemical weapons. "This isn't just about revenge," she realized. "He's using us as a distraction while he sets up his real operation." Max's hackles rose as they entered the building, and Sarah knew they were walking into the most dangerous situation of their careers. But they were walking into it together, and that made all the difference. Building C felt like walking into a tomb. Sarah and Max moved through the shadowy corridors with practiced silence, every step calculated to minimize noise on the debris-strewn floor. The chemical smell was stronger here, making Sarah's eyes water and causing Max to breathe through his mouth to avoid the worst of the fumes. They reached the motor pool to find it empty, except for tire tracks in the dust. The tank was gone, but Sarah could see evidence of recent activity: fresh footprints, cigarette butts, equipment cases that had been hastily moved. "He's not here," Sarah said quietly, then realized her mistake. Of course Draven wasn't here. This was another layer of his trap. Max suddenly froze, his ears pricked toward the building's rear exit. Sarah heard it too, the low rumble of diesel engines approaching from multiple directions. They were being surrounded. "Collins," Agent Chen's voice crackled through her earpiece. "We've got a problem. Satellite imagery shows at least 12 vehicles converging on your position. Military-grade equipment, professional formation." Sarah looked at Max, who was already moving toward what appeared to be their only escape route, a maintenance tunnel that led toward the adjacent building. Her partner's instincts had kept them alive this long. "Chen, I need backup at the north perimeter in 15 minutes. Sarah said, following Max into the tunnel. "And I need you to track that tank. Draven's planning something bigger than just killing me." The tunnel was narrow and dark, forcing Sarah to use her tactical flashlight to follow Max's lead. The dog moved with confidence, his nose guiding them through passages that human senses couldn't navigate effectively. They emerged in Building D's basement to find an unexpected sight. Jake Morrison, the fake soldier they'd arrested days earlier, crouched beside a radio setup with his hands zip-tied behind his back. "Officer Collins," Morrison said, relief evident in his voice. "Thank God. I thought you were more of Draven's men." Sarah kept her weapon ready while Max approached Morrison cautiously. The dog's body language suggested the man wasn't an immediate threat, but Sarah had learned to be suspicious of convenient coincidences. "How did you get here?" Sarah demanded. "Draven's people broke me out during transport," Morrison explained, "but I managed to escape when they stopped to coordinate with other units. I've been hiding here for 6 hours, listening to their radio chatter." Sarah studied Morrison's face, looking for signs of deception. Max's assessment seemed positive. The dog wasn't showing stress signals that would indicate lying. "What did you hear?" Morrison's expression was grim. "It's not just about the tank, Collins. Draven's got chemical weapons positioned at 3 locations around Atlanta. The tank is just the delivery system for the largest deployment. Sarah felt her blood turn cold. How large? Enough to contaminate a 10-square-mile area. He's planning to hit the CDC during their international conference next week. 2,000 scientists and medical professionals from around the world. The scope of Draven's plan hit Sarah like a physical blow. This wasn't just arms trafficking or revenge. This was terrorism on a massive scale. "Where are the other chemical weapons?" Sarah asked, cutting Morrison's restraints with her tactical knife. "I don't know the exact locations, but I heard coordinates over the radio." Morrison rubbed his wrists where the zip ties had cut into his skin. "Draven's got former military personnel at each site. Professional soldiers who think they're serving some kind of higher purpose." Sarah's earpiece crackled with Agent Chen's voice. "Collins, we've identified the tank's location. It's mobile, heading toward downtown Atlanta. ETA to the CDC complex is 35 minutes. Max moved to the basement's small window, his body language indicating movement outside. Sarah joined him and saw tactical vehicles surrounding the building. Draven's forces had found them. "Morrison, can you operate that radio equipment?" "Yeah, it's standard military communications gear. Get on the federal emergency frequency and give them those coordinates. Every minute counts if we're going to stop multiple chemical attacks." While Morrison worked the radio, Sarah assessed their tactical situation. They were outnumbered, outgunned, and trapped in a basement with limited escape options. But they had advantages that Draven couldn't anticipate. Max's detection abilities and Sarah's knowledge of police response protocols. "Agent Chen," Sarah said into her earpiece, "I need you to coordinate with the Army's Chemical Corps. We're dealing with multiple chemical weapons deployments, not just the tank." "Copy that. We're scrambling response teams, but it'll take time to coordinate a multi-site operation." Time they didn't have. Sarah looked at Max, who was watching her with absolute trust despite the impossible odds they faced. "Collins," Morrison said, looking up from the radio, "I've got federal agencies coordinating response to the coordinates, but there's something else. Draven's been monitoring police frequencies. He knows about your backup, knows about the federal response." Sarah realized with growing dread that Draven was always one step ahead because he had access to law enforcement communications. His inside contacts weren't just providing information, they were actively sabotaging the response. "Which means our backup isn't coming," Sarah said. Max moved closer to her, pressing his warm body against her legs. Her partner's loyalty was unwavering, even when facing impossible odds. "Morrison, how many men does Draven have with him?" "At least 20 at this location, probably more at the other sites. All former military, all highly trained. 20 against 3. Terrible odds by any measure. But Sarah had faced bad odds before, and Max had never let her down. "Chen," Sarah said into her earpiece, "I need you to jam all police frequencies in a 5-mile radius. Cut off Draven's intelligence advantage. That'll cut off your communication too." "I know, but it'll also blind him to federal response movements." Sarah checked her ammunition and adjusted Max's tactical harness. Her partner was watching her with the same focused intensity he showed before high-risk operations. "Morrison, you said Draven's men think they're serving a higher purpose. What if we could show them what they're really doing?" "What do you mean?" Sarah looked at the radio equipment, an idea forming. "Can you patch into their communications frequency?" Morrison nodded. "It's encrypted, but I know the protocols." "Do it. I want to talk to Draven's soldiers directly." Max's tail gave a single thump of approval. Her partner understood they were about to try something unprecedented, turning Draven's own forces against him. As Morrison worked to establish the connection, Sarah prepared for the most important conversation of her career. She had to convince trained soldiers to abandon their mission based on the word of a police officer they'd never met. "Frequencies open," Morrison reported. Sarah took a deep breath and keyed the microphone. "This is Officer Sarah Collins, Atlanta PD. I'm speaking to all personnel currently under Colonel Draven's command." The radio crackled with silence, then voices demanding to know how she'd accessed their frequency. "You've been told you're serving your country," Sarah continued, "but you're about to participate in the largest terrorist attack in American history. Children will die. Innocent people will suffer. That's not service, that's murder. Max pressed closer to her, offering strength for what came next. Sarah was betting everything on the honor that Draven claimed his men still possessed. The radio silence lasted exactly 30 seconds before all hell broke loose. Sarah could hear shouting through the communication system as Draven's soldiers realized their frequency had been compromised. Some voices demanded to know if what she'd said was true. Others cursed her for spreading lies. "You have children," Sarah continued into the microphone, ignoring the chaos. "Families. The chemical weapons you're protecting will kill thousands of innocent people, including kids who go to school 6 blocks from where you're standing." Max's ears swiveled toward the basement windows, and Sarah could hear vehicles moving outside. Draven's forces were repositioning, probably trying to isolate and eliminate the source of the radio transmission. Morrison was monitoring multiple frequencies simultaneously, his face growing pale as he processed the communications traffic. "Collins, there's dissent in the ranks. Some of Draven's men are questioning their orders." "How many?" "Hard to tell, but at least 3 units have gone radio silent. Either they're following protocol to avoid detection, or they're refusing to participate." A new voice cut through the radio chatter, Draven himself, his tone cold and commanding. "All units, maintain operational security. The source of the unauthorized transmission has been identified and will be eliminated shortly." Sarah keyed the microphone again. "Colonel Draven, this is Officer Collins. I know you can hear me." "Indeed I can, Officer Collins. You've managed to complicate what should have been a simple operation." "Simple?" Sarah felt anger building in her chest. "You're planning to murder thousands of innocent people." "I'm planning to demonstrate the consequences of American foreign policy failures. The chemical weapons your government claims to have destroyed are still very much operational, thanks to classified programs your father discovered." Max moved to Sarah's side, pressing against her leg as her emotional state intensified. Her partner's presence helped her maintain focus despite the rage coursing through her system. "My father was trying to prevent this," Sarah said into the radio. "Your father was naive. He believed the system could be reformed from within. I learned that real change requires more dramatic measures." Morrison looked up from his monitoring equipment. "Collins, federal response teams are moving on 2 of the 3 chemical sites, but they haven't located the tank yet." Through the basement windows, Sarah could see tactical lights approaching Building D. Draven's forces were closing in, and their time was running out. "Morrison, can you patch me into federal command frequency?" "Already done. You're broadcasting on all law enforcement channels simultaneously." Sarah took a deep breath, knowing this might be her last transmission. "This is Officer Collins to all federal units. The tank is equipped with chemical weapons and is heading toward the CDC complex. The deployment system is automated. If the tank reaches its target, it will release toxins regardless of whether Draven's personnel are present." Agent Chen's voice crackled through the static. "Collins, we have visual on the tank. It's 2 miles from the CDC and moving through downtown traffic. How do we stop it without triggering a chemical release?" Sarah looked at Max, who was watching her with absolute trust. Her partner had detected the chemical weapons from the beginning, and his instincts might be the key to stopping the attack. "Max can detect the specific chemical signature," Sarah said. "If we can get close enough, he can identify the exact location of the release mechanism." "That would require getting within 50 feet of a mobile chemical weapon," Chen replied. "It's suicide. It's the only way to save thousands of lives." Max stood and moved toward the basement exit, his body language indicating readiness for action. Sarah had seen this behavior before. Her partner was preparing for the most dangerous mission of their careers. Morrison grabbed Sarah's arm. "Wait, there might be another way." He pulled up schematics on his portable computer, showing the tank's internal modifications. "The chemical system has a manual override, but it requires simultaneous activation from 2 separate locations, one inside the tank, one at a remote control station." "Where's the control station?" "Mobile command vehicle, probably traveling with the tank to maintain communication range." Sarah studied the schematic, understanding flooding through her. So, if we can take out the command vehicle, the automatic system would default to safe mode, Morrison confirmed. The chemicals couldn't be released without manual activation from inside the tank itself. Max suddenly tensed, his ears alert to sounds Sarah couldn't detect. Through the basement windows, she could see muzzle flashes as Draven's forces began their assault on the building. "Time's up," Sarah said, grabbing her tactical gear. "Morrison, can you guide Federal forces to that command vehicle?" "Yeah, but what about you?" Sarah looked at Max, who was already moving toward their escape route, a maintenance tunnel that led toward the motor pool. "We're going to do what we do best, hunt down the bad guys." The tunnel system proved more extensive than Sarah had expected, allowing them to emerge near the base's communications center. From this position, she could see the tactical situation clearly. Draven's forces had surrounded Building D, but they were spread thin, covering multiple escape routes. Max's nose was working overtime, processing scents that would guide them toward their target. Sarah had learned to trust her partner's detection abilities completely, and right now he was tracking something specific. "What is it, boy?" Sarah asked quietly. Max led her toward a cluster of vehicles parked near the base's main gate. Among them was an armored command vehicle bristling with communication equipment, exactly what Morrison had described. Through her earpiece, Sarah could hear Agent Chen coordinating the federal response. "Tank is 1 mile from CDC complex. We need that command vehicle neutralized now." Sarah checked her weapon and looked at Max. Her partner's eyes held the same determination that had carried them through 6 years of dangerous missions. "Ready to save the city?" she asked. Max's response was a low growl that meant only one thing: "Let's finish this." They moved through the shadows toward the command vehicle, Sarah's training and Max's instincts working in perfect harmony. This was what they'd trained for, the moment when everything they'd learned would be tested against the highest possible stakes. As they approached the vehicle, Sarah could hear radio chatter confirming her worst fears. The tank was entering the CDC complex's outer perimeter. They had minutes to stop a chemical weapons attack that could kill thousands. Max suddenly stopped, his attention focused on the command vehicle's rear entrance. Sarah could see movement inside, at least 3 personnel monitoring multiple screens and communication systems. "Max," Sarah whispered, "this one's for Dad." Her partner's tail gave a single, determined thump. Together, they prepared to assault a military command post with nothing but courage, training, and the unbreakable bond between a police officer and her K-9 partner. The assault on the command vehicle lasted exactly 90 seconds. Sarah and Max moved with the precision of a unit that had trained together for years, each anticipating the other's actions perfectly. Max disabled the first operator with a tackle that sent the man crashing into the communications equipment, while Sarah took down the other 2 with tactical efficiency that would have made her father proud. "Command vehicle neutralized," Sarah reported into her earpiece, even as warning lights flashed across the disabled control systems. "Chemical release system should be in safe mode." Agent Chen's voice crackled with relief and urgency. "Confirmed. Tank's automatic systems have shut down, but Draven's still inside the vehicle, and he can trigger manual release if he reaches the CDC." Through the command vehicle's monitors, Sarah could see aerial footage of the tank moving through downtown Atlanta traffic. Federal vehicles were converging from multiple directions, but the 70-ton monster was unstoppable by conventional means. "How long until the tank reaches the CDC?" Sarah asked. 8 minutes, Chen replied. "We're evacuating the complex, but there are still 200 people inside who can't be moved in time." Max suddenly alerted to movement outside the command vehicle. Sarah peered through the armored windows to see Victor Draven approaching with a small team of remaining soldiers. His silver hair was disheveled, his uniform torn, but his cold blue eyes burned with fanatic determination. "Officer Collins," Draven's voice came through an external speaker, "you've cost me significant resources and personnel, but you haven't stopped the mission." Sarah keyed the vehicle's external communication system. Your chemical release system is disabled, Draven. It's over. The automated system, yes, but I can still trigger manual release once I reach the target area. 200 scientists and medical professionals. Imagine the global impact when the world's leading disease experts become casualties of American chemical weapons. Max moved to Sarah's side, his body tense and ready for action. Her partner could sense the evil in Draven's voice, the corruption that had consumed a man who once swore to protect innocent lives. Why? Sarah asked. Why kill innocent people? Because innocent people die every day due to government incompetence and military bureaucracy. At least these deaths will serve a purpose. They'll expose the hypocrisy of a system that preaches peace while stockpiling weapons of mass destruction. Sarah realized with growing horror that Draven genuinely believed his twisted logic. He wasn't just a criminal, he was a terrorist who thought he was serving justice. "Agent Chen," Sarah said into her earpiece, "I need helicopter transport to the CDC immediately." "Collins, you can't seriously be thinking of engaging a tank with small arms." "I'm thinking of stopping a madman from committing mass murder," Sarah replied, checking her tactical gear. "Max detected those chemicals from the beginning. He can find the manual release mechanism even if I can't." Max's tail thumped once, their signal for absolute agreement and readiness. Through the command vehicle's monitors, Sarah watched Draven's remaining soldiers board military vehicles for what appeared to be a final assault on her position. But she also noticed something that gave her hope. Several of his men were walking away from their vehicles, abandoning their posts. Her radio broadcast had worked. Some of Draven's soldiers had chosen honor over blind obedience. "Morrison," Sarah called to her ally, who was monitoring communications from the building's basement. "How many of Draven's men are still loyal to him?" "Maybe half," Morrison replied. "The others have either surrendered to federal forces or simply walked away, word spreading that this was a chemical weapons attack on civilians." The sound of helicopter rotors filled the air as federal tactical teams prepared for the final confrontation. Sarah gathered her equipment and checked Max's tactical harness one last time. "Chen, I need you to coordinate ground support. Max and I are going to intercept that tank." "How do you plan to stop a 70-ton armored vehicle?" Sarah looked at Max, who was watching her with absolute trust. "The same way we've solved every case for 6 years. Max finds the problem and I fix it." "Udi." The helicopter ride to downtown Atlanta took 12 minutes. Time Sarah used to study blueprints of the M1A2 Abrams tank and identify potential access points. Max sat calmly beside her, his nose constantly working to process the scents carried by the wind. "There," Sarah said, pointing to a ventilation grill on the tank's rear deck. "That's how Draven's people installed the chemical system. It's also how we're getting inside." Agent Chen, monitoring from the Federal Command Center, voiced what everyone was thinking. "Collins, if you're wrong about the chemical containment, you and Max will be dead in seconds." "If we're right, we save 200 lives," Sarah replied. "That's a trade I can live with." The helicopter put them down on a rooftop 4 blocks from the CDC complex. From this vantage point, Sarah could see the tank moving slowly through downtown traffic, federal vehicles maintaining a careful distance to avoid triggering Draven's manual release system. "Max," Sarah said, kneeling beside her partner, "this is the big one. Everything we've trained for comes down to the next 10 minutes. Max looked at her with those intelligent brown eyes that had guided her through countless dangerous situations. His tail gave a single, confident thump. Together, they rappelled from the building onto the tank as it moved through an intersection. Sarah had never attempted anything so dangerous, but Max's presence gave her courage beyond her normal limits. The ventilation access was exactly where the blueprints indicated. Sarah pried it open while Max's nose worked to identify the chemical signatures coming from inside the tank. Her partner's reaction told her everything she needed to know. The chemicals were contained, but active. "Going in," Sarah reported through her earpiece. The tank's interior was a nightmare of improvised chemical equipment grafted onto military hardware. Sarah could see the manual release mechanism, a simple lever that would flood the CDC complex with enough chemical agents to kill everyone inside. And sitting beside that lever was Victor Draven, his cold eyes reflecting 15 years of consuming hatred. "Officer Collins," he said calmly, "I wondered when you'd arrive." Max dropped through the access hatch behind Sarah, landing silently in the tank's cramped interior. The dog's presence seemed to unnerve Draven in a way that Sarah's weapon couldn't. "Step away from the release mechanism," Sarah ordered. "I think not. Your father tried to give me orders once. It didn't end well for him." Sarah felt rage building in her chest, but Max's steady presence kept her focused. "You murdered him. I eliminated a threat to operational security. Just as I'm about to eliminate his daughter." Draven's hand moved toward the release lever, but Max was faster. 90 pounds of Belgian Malinois launched across the tank's interior, driving Draven away from the chemical controls. Sarah secured the release mechanism, while Max held Draven pinned to the floor. Her partner's teeth were inches from the man's throat, but the dog's discipline held. Max was a police dog, not an executioner. "Victor Draven," Sarah said, applying handcuffs, "you're under arrest for terrorism, murder, and treason." As federal agents secured the scene and hazmat teams began dismantling the chemical weapons, Sarah sat with Max outside the CDC complex. 200 scientists and medical professionals went about their work, unaware of how close they'd come to becoming casualties of one man's twisted quest for revenge. "We did it, partner," Sarah said, running her fingers through Max's fur. Max looked up at her with satisfaction in his brown eyes. Justice had been served, the innocent had been protected, and the bond between them had proven unbreakable. In the distance, Sarah could see Victor Draven being loaded into a federal transport vehicle, his military career ending in disgrace and his chemical weapons network dismantled. The man who had killed her father was finally facing the consequences of his actions. "Dad would be proud," Sarah whispered. Max's tail thumped against the ground, a sound that meant home, safety, and the continuation of their partnership in the service of justice.